Aloha Malamapono, and welcome to part 3 of our time with Grandmaster Don Crummer and Snake Blocker here in Hawaii.
What I want to talk about in our part 3 segment while I have you here is everybody has their stories within a system, stuff that made you a better person, or stuff you have observed, good or bad, inside or outside the circles. And I'm sure you've got stories, I've got stories, and how it kind of brings us back full circle. And you know, no matter who I talk to that's been around for, you know, a few decades here, we all have some type of foundational connection to California and Hawaii, and the instructors of those two parts that kind of influence the world. The Kajukenbo system, Kempo system, G-Kado, it's all full circle. It all crisscrosses into the trainings from people within these systems. So we're all brothers in the system, whether you had one specific method training from one lineage or not, it's all connected. So if you could start with some of the stories.
Well, I've got a really fun story that I have that brings me back. And I'm an old surfer. I've surfed all my life, just like Grandmaster Kai. So you know, we have a real definite bond with the ocean. Us being here in Hawaii, being originally from California, and so you know, I do trips and stuff like that all the time with my brothers and go surfing in different places. Well, one time, this is back in 1986, I took a trip to Puerto Rico, and me and a couple of my really good brothers that I would travel the world with, we're over there in Hawaii, and we're staying in a town called Rincon. And you know, you're never expecting to know anybody or see anybody that's a Kajukenbo guy back in a place like Rincon, you know, a little sleepy surf town back in those days. And so we're renting a house for a small amount, and you know, one of the small days that there was no surf, I was out there in the backyard just doing my forms, just kind of staying up with everything, you know, and I'm doing my forms, and I'm going, but you know, sometimes you just get that feeling you're being watched, and it's like that old show that was on TV. What was that, where the guy would look over the fence and all you see was his eyes. I look over the fence and all I see are these two pairs of eyes going. I go, hello, and he goes, you're Kajukenbo! You're Kajukenbo, I know! And I go, wow, how do you know that? I'm Kajukenbo! He was the most happiest man I've ever seen in my life.
This is a local.
This is a local. And I'm going, wow. Well, what's your name, sir? And he jumps over the fence and, my name, Agustin Santades. Who are you? Oh, I'm just Don Crummer, man. I'm over here practicing. He goes, my teacher, they all came from here. Or they come here to teach us. We learned many years ago. I've never seen anybody from Kajukenbo here in all these years. And so anyways, there was a good contingency of Puerto Ricans, because back in the day, there was a guy by the name of Don Nahulewa, who was Alejo Reyes' first black belt. Well, Don Nahulewa trained a guy by the name of George Jackson from Florida. George Jackson, when he was in the military, went to Ramey Base, and he was stationed there in Puerto Rico. And he taught a big contingency of guys, Cherry Ortega, Harry Soltades, Agustin Soltades, Luis Hernandez, who actually became Agustin and Harry's instructor. So Luis Hernandez was under George Jackson. George Jackson was under Don Nahulewa. Don Nahulewa under Alejo Reyes. So our lineage was actually the exact same knowledge. So I get done, you know, I must train with you. We must train together. So okay, so we trained the whole cup. I was there for about 2 months surfing, so we trained the whole time we were there. And when I left, I made the mistake of giving him my phone number. He called me relentlessly every 3 or 4 days for 6 months. You must move to Puerto Rico. You must come and start the school. I will bring you many, many students. And I had nothing going on at the time, so all right, I'm going to hold you to this, Augustine. And I did. I moved to Puerto Rico. I opened a school in Rincon, and we had many, many students. And I was there from '86 until 1990, when I actually got the Benz diving, and I had to go back to the mainland to seek medical help. But they continued on and created many black belts. Right now, one of the black belts that came from Agustin Soltares now lives with me in Waimanalo. He's a federal agent at the airport, and he needed a place to live when he came to Hawaii, so him and his wife are now living with me, a student of my good friend Agustin Soltares. So just went full circle within the whole realm, and unfortunately my good friend Augustine has passed away. I had a heart attack a few years back, but his brother, who I also trained with, and who I'm still very, very close with, is still kicking, and the guy trains every single day.
How about you, GrandMaster?
Well, that was hard to beat, but people who have met me over the years have always wondered how I ended up being so diverse in my training experiences. And honestly, the credit for that does go to Kajukenbo. So as a child growing up, I trained primarily in two different systems that were very different from each other, but were both developed here. So the first class I ever took was with my father's teacher, and Uncle David Nuuhiwa was his name, and he was trained in kind of everything that ever came from here. So the indigenous Hawaiian Lua, Okazaki's Kodenkan Danzanru Judo and Jiu-Jitsu. He also was ranked under Chow in Kempo, and he and Sijo were friends to the level where the respect that Sijo, the founder of Kajukenbo, had for him was like not measurable. He was one of the only people that was recognized within Kajukenbo as a tentai. And Uncle David presented the knowledge in such a way that you could feel something behind the techniques. And that is what I got from him as a small little boy. Much of the training I got was indirect, meaning I'm like a little 3-year-old kid watching my father train with him and watching the other adults train with him. And he also was a good friend of Grandmaster Don's. But I picked up something that was uniquely Hawaiian in the way that he taught. He was all about aloha. He was all about that feeling that has echoed through my entire life, in the sense that no good decision is ever made out of anger and fear. Good decisions are made out of courage and love. If you want a better world, you have to be the aloha you want to see in that world. Our ancestors, when we think of Hawaiian culture, you hear all the time the phrase, if you give a man a fish, he eats for a day. If you teach him how to fish, he eats for a lifetime. But in Hawaiian culture, we made fish ponds. So you'd stack up rocks in a secluded bay, and the small fish would swim in through the holes in the rocks to escape the predators. But then you feed them, and they grow too big to escape. And now your family has a source of fish going generations beyond the kupuna who built the fish pond. So the way that Uncle David taught was in this way, which was to give you a hint at something far beyond the technique that he was showing. So by the time I was in 6th grade, I was noticing how different Kajukenbo was from its source arts, because one of the source arts I was taking, the Judo and Jiu-Jitsu. So I was asking a lot of questions. I'd asked George Iverson, my teacher, and Sifu, which part is the ka, which part is the ju, which part is the ken, which part is the bo, and he said, oh, well, I know this and this, but this other part, I'm not 100% sure, but that's a good question. You're a young kid, you're inquisitive, you go find out and you tell me. And he literally ordered me to do this. So then I said, oh, can I have permission to take other things? And he said, okay, that isn't really done, but I'll support you if you agree to 3 things. 1, you finish what you start. If you go and do this, you learn thoroughly and be a good student in these systems. 2, you don't quit. You stay with me. You're still my student. 3, you show me what you learn, right? So then that became a passport to a whole world, not just of the martial arts, but of friends throughout the world. So starting in 6th grade, I started like trying to formally study. And initially the Ka, I studied with Ken Funakoshi and his son Kevin in Shotokan Karate, and then, you know, other different systems along the way. But by the time I finished high school, I had this very wide base of understanding that because of the support of my Kajukenbo teacher and of Sijo, who when I asked about this as a teenager, he said, oh yeah, good, you learn, go make it better. Then my best friend and I took a trip to see America with sleeping bags in a tent and just driving across the country. And the martial arts became my Motel 6 or my Holiday Inn, because everywhere we went, we would go to a different place. And back in the day before the internet, there was this thing called the Yellow Pages, and we'd like call up all the places and see who was down to let us show up. And I had a white gi and a black gi and a bag with a white belt and a black belt, you know, whatever they wanted me to do. But I'd always wear a white belt unless they told me to do something else. More often than not, we ended up with a place to crash, partly because everyone wants to come to Hawaii someday, right? So I'd say, hey, you know, if I can crash somewhere here in Raccoon Mountain, Tennessee, because I'm here to do hang gliding, then if you ever come to Hawaii, you know, I'll help you out. And you would be surprised how many times this has happened. So all across America, regardless of what style, right? Because Kajukenbo is a hybrid, multicultural, multi-ethnic, mixed martial art, and so is Danzaru Jiu-Jitsu, that was my base. Like, it was kind of an invitation to discover, like almost like being an Indiana Jones of martial arts, all these other incarnations and expressions of the martial arts. So, and then, you know, in Europe as well, shout out to my friend Professor Bruno Rebello, who hosts the World Championships. You know, he invites everyone to gather them in one place, and that's another incarnation of full circle. So this is the birthplace of Kajukenbo, but because of that idea of taking martial arts from all over the world and mixing them into one system that was born here, I ended up having a passport in my heart to be able to learn martial arts from all over the world. And I'm forever grateful to Sijo, Sid Assumption, George Iverson, and all of my senior uncles and aunties in the art for that.
Thank you very much for your time, Grandmaster.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wow.